Have you ever walked through an old European palace and suddenly felt that something in those walls doesn't add up? That it's not just a story about kings, gold, and paintings, but about something hidden? In this video, we uncover the palaces of Europe where rooms were found containing 19th century technologies that should not exist. And trust me, these are not the pretty legends they tell on tours. Picture this: Prague. The year is 1889. Restorers open an old panel in the wall, and behind it, copper spirals, tubes, channels, shaped like an electrical switchboard. The problem? Electricity wasn't installed there for another 15 years. In another palace, in Bavaria, they find a room no one was ever meant to see. Sealed, locked, dust-covered. Inside, metal plates, resonant cylinders, copper rails in the floor. On the door, a sign, Kammer für akustische Übertragung, a room for transmitting sound in the 19th century, before telephones. And that's not all. Similar rooms appear in Vienna, in Turin, in Budapest. Each one, the same construction, the same metal, the same trace. What was this? Early electricity? A forgotten technology? Or something we were never supposed to know about? And the biggest question, if these rooms truly existed, why were they quietly destroyed after the First World War? So tell me, if palaces across Europe held devices that should not exist, then what else in our history isn't what it seems? If palaces across Europe held devices that should not exist, then what else in our history refuses to fit neatly into the official story? So, let's start with a single photograph. Prague, 1889. A palace storage room, dusty, overlooked, frozen in a forgotten corner of the estate. Someone raises a camera and captures an image. That photo survives in the municipal archive, catalog number 743, placed under a bland label, Miscellaneous Interior Documentation. For more than a century, nobody paid attention. Then, in 2007, a museum restorer reviewing old records lingers on that image. Something in it pulls her closer. On the wall hangs a copper panel. Spirals etched across its surface form tight symmetrical whorls. Tubes branch outward in a deliberate geometric pattern. Along the edges, thin traces resemble wiring pathways. The museum's note says only, "Ornamental panel, provenance unclear." But she recognizes it instantly. She dives into industrial catalogs, technical manuals from 1896, early electrical distribution guides, and there, almost impossible to overlook, appears the exact same configuration. The same spirals, the same branching tubes, the same conductor lines traced with mathematical precision. An electrical panel, documented, manufactured, and distributed in 1896. Yet the photograph shows it already mounted 7 years earlier, inside a palace that, according to every official record, did not receive electricity until 1904. She files a formal inquiry. Palace archives confirm the construction timeline. Official histories describe the grand ceremony in 1904 when electric lights first illuminated the ancient halls. Newspapers celebrate the moment, marveling at modern technology entering a royal residence for the first time. And yet the panel is unmistakably present in 1889. Clear, sharp, photographed, catalogued, archived. She magnifies the image. The panel isn't tucked away in a utility space or half hidden behind masonry. It occupies a central wall in what appears to be a reception hall. Dust hangs in the air, stirred by recent movement, evidence that the room was used regularly, not abandoned. Cross-referencing old palace blueprints reveals something stranger. The room no longer exists. Renovations in 1922 removed the entire wing. Architectural documents from the demolition offer only a short note. East storage section dismantled. Materials repurposed. There are no surviving photographs of the demolition, no inventory of removed items, no record of the copper panel's whereabouts. The restorer reaches out to colleagues across European museum networks. She asks if anyone has encountered similar inconsistencies, early electrical devices predating their supposed invention, inexplicable technologies embedded in aristocratic architecture. The replies arrive gradually: Vienna, Budapest, Turin, Munich. Yes, they have seen similar objects. Yes, the dates don't match the accepted timeline. Yes, official descriptions remain vague, as though written to avoid uncomfortable conclusions. A Munich archivist sends photographs of brass cylinders uncovered during renovations at the residence palace. Technical analysis dates them to the 1870s. Their internal structure mirrors acoustic resonators developed decades later. Museum labels describe them as decorative acoustic ornaments, but laboratory tests reveal they amplify specific frequencies with a level of precision that should require 20th century engineering. Another reply arrives from Vienna. A conservator reports copper lattices discovered beneath palace dome structures. Their geometric layout mirrors acoustic focusing arrays used in physics labs of the 1930s. Yet, construction records place those domes firmly in the 1860s. A pattern begins to take shape, not through one dramatic revelation, but through accumulation, small discrepancies, mismatched dates, objects appearing in photographs before their time, technologies embedded in architecture long before their official invention. Each finding raises the same uneasy question: were these installations truly advanced technologies, or merely decorative curiosities misinterpreted by modern observers? Neither answer sits comfortably, because if they were decorative, why do they function when tested? And if they were functional, why does no historical record acknowledge their purpose? The Prague photograph endures. Catalog number 743. A copper panel identical to industrial designs from 7 years later, installed in a palace officially said to be unpowered, documented with complete indifference by archivists who saw nothing unusual. History books present progress as a steady, linear climb. Edison's bulb, Westinghouse's generators, the gradual spread of electrification across Europe and, eventually, into royal estates. But that photograph hints at something else entirely. It suggests that progress may have moved in ways not recorded, that palaces once contained technologies quietly omitted from official histories, that beneath the familiar story of innovation lies a deeper, hidden layer of development, one that left traces in forgotten storage rooms, sealed chambers behind palace walls, and photographs nobody bothered to question. Until now. The photograph in Prague raised difficult questions, but questions remain theoretical until you encounter something you can stand in front of, something built, sealed, and hidden. Bavaria, 2012. A restoration team works inside Schloss Hartenfels, a palace dating back to the 1500s. Their mandate is routine: reinforce aging structures, scan the walls, check foundations, preserve the building exactly as it stands. Then the scanner detects a void, a hollow space behind the plaster of the west wing, a sealed chamber measuring roughly 4 meters by 6, no doors, no windows, no visible access from any adjoining rooms. The team hesitates. Breaching original masonry requires justification, and palace authorities worry about damaging historically protected walls. But the anomaly is too precise to ignore. Curiosity wins. They cut carefully through layers of plaster and brick. The wall is nearly 1/2 meter thick, a deliberate barrier. Whoever closed this room intended it to stay closed. When the final section gives way, a wave of dust rushes out, dense, stale, unmoving for more than a century. Inside, The room waits untouched. Brass cylinders line the walls, each about 1 meter tall, secured on iron brackets. Their surfaces carry engraved measurements, calibration marks, numerical sequences suggesting tuning or frequency adjustment. From the ceiling hang metal plates suspended on copper chains. When touched, they vibrate with a faint, lingering resonance, a vibration that persists far longer than expected. One team member murmurs, "It's like the metal remembers being in motion." Copper rails run across the floor in parallel lines, forming a precise grid. They meet at junctions in the corners. The pattern resembles an electrical grounding layout, yet analysis shows no evidence that electrical current ever passed through them. But the most striking feature dominates the far wall, a massive panel of resonant chambers, honeycomb-like cells of bronze and copper. Each chamber measures exactly 8 centimeters across, 72 chambers total, arranged in a mathematically flawless grid. Above the doorframe, carved in elegant script, an inscription reads, "Kammer für akustische Übertragung," room for acoustic transmission. Below it, a date, 1873. The restoration team documents everything, photographs from every angle, measurements, samples. They contact acoustic engineers, metallurgists, historians. The verdict is unanimous. These components were not decorative. The brass cylinders show abrasion consistent with frequent adjustment. The resonant chambers follow precise mathematical ratios. The copper rails contain alloy mixtures too deliberate to be accidental. This was functioning equipment. But what kind of function? Palace records offer no mention of such a room. Architectural plans from the 1870s list this area simply as storage chambers. No special designation, no hint of sealed laboratories or acoustic experiments. Construction logs stored in municipal archives record the installation of custom metalwork in the West Wing during the summer of 1873. The invoice lists brass cylinders, copper plates, and resonant bronze. But nothing explains why those materials were needed, or what they formed. Searching for parallels, the team examines other Bavarian palaces. They find hints, vague references in decades-old maintenance notes, rooms with acoustic apparatus, spaces containing sound-focusing equipment. Most of these rooms were dismantled during early 1900 renovations. One engineering report from 1922 states, "Removed obsolete acoustic devices from East Chamber. Materials donated to Technical Institute." The Technical Institute has no record of receiving any such donation. Then a letter appears in the palace archives, dated March 1914. A royal engineer writes to the palace administrator, "Per your instruction, demonstrations of the resonance chamber have ceased. Visitors have begun asking questions we cannot answer. I recommend sealing the room entirely. The device serves no decorative purpose, and its true function cannot be disclosed without raising concerns." 3 months later, construction logs record masonry work in the West Wing. The work order reads simply, "Wall reinforcement." That same year, the room disappears from all updated palace maps. Testing begins. The brass cylinders resonate at distinct frequencies. When arranged in order, they form harmonic intervals later used in telecommunications, developed nearly 40 years afterward. The metal plates react to vibration in patterns identical to modern acoustic amplification systems, technology unknown in the 19th century. The spacing of the copper rails matches wavelength patterns for early electromagnetic transmission, the kind used in pioneering radio experiments. But the room was sealed in 1914, long before radio existed. The restoration team publishes their findings in a preservation journal. The article draws modest interest among specialists. Tourism officials remain quiet. No press releases, no exhibits, no tours. In the updated palace brochures, the chamber earns only a single line, Hidden room discovered during renovations. Purpose unclear. Yet the contents remain inside the sealed space. The brass cylinders, the resonant chambers, the copper rails embedded in stone. All of it meticulously engineered. All of it installed in 1873. All of it built for a purpose that official history never bothered, or never dared, to record. The discoveries in Prague and Bavaria raise questions no archive can settle on its own. So the next step is testimony, the kind that survives only because someone chooses to speak. Schwerin, northern Germany. A palace perched beside a lake, known to tourists for its gilded halls, ornate ceilings, and predictable narratives about ducal life. Nothing in the brochures suggests anything unusual. Everything appears safely catalogued, comfortably explained. But in 2009, a journalist researching architectural preservation projects tracks down a retired conservator. His name is Heinrich Vogel. He worked at Schloss Schwerin from 1962 until 1987. The interview begins without urgency. Restoration methods, historical challenges, ordinary professional recollections. Then the journalist mentions unusual structural features. Vogel stops mid-sentence. He asks whether the conversation is being recorded. It isn't. When he continues, he speaks with deliberate precision, the careful tone of someone who has kept a secret for decades and understands the weight of finally releasing it. There were rooms, he says slowly, where the ceiling did something it should not do. He describes the northwest wing, third floor, a sequence of chambers once used for 19th-century state receptions. The ceilings were covered in elaborate plasterwork, geometric patterns radiating outward from central medallions. Decorative, beautiful, seemingly harmless. Except the ceilings didn't behave like decoration. Vogel first noticed it during routine maintenance. When someone dropped a tool, the sound didn't fade the way it should have. It sharpened, carried, amplified itself at specific points in the room, becoming louder than physics allowed. He mentioned this to senior staff. They told him, "The designs are aesthetic. Do not test them." But Vogel knew acoustics. Conservators must understand how structures carry vibration, and so he tested them anyway. He brought simple equipment, a tuning fork, a decibel meter, notebooks, and a colleague to help record results. They discovered that certain frequencies resonated through the plaster patterns with almost no energy loss. Sound waves traveled along the ceiling's geometric channels, strengthened at junction nodes, and converged at precise points across the room. The effect wasn't imaginary. It was measurable. A whisper at one end became clearly audible at the opposite corner, not through ordinary acoustic reflection, but through the ceiling itself. It was not decorative, Vogel says. It was engineered. He searched construction documents. The ceiling was installed in 1878. The architect's notes mentioned acoustic considerations, but nothing more. The material description listed plaster mixed with copper dust, uncommon, but not unheard of. What unsettled Vogel was the precision. The geometric layouts weren't arbitrary ornaments. They followed exact mathematical ratios, specific angles, consistent spacing between nodes, all too deliberate for mere decoration. He found identical patterns in neighboring rooms, same ratios, same geometries, same impossible acoustics. He compiled a technical report with diagrams, measurements, and acoustic readings. He submitted it to palace administrators. The response came quickly. His access to those rooms was revoked. His report was filed without discussion. A senior administrator told him further investigation was unnecessary and disruptive. Vogel was instructed to return to standard restoration work. He did, but he remembered. Years later, during renovations in the 1980s, portions of those ceilings were removed. Vogel was not part of the removal team. When he asked what happened to the materials, supervisors claimed they were discarded due to structural instability. But Vogel had personally inspected those ceilings. They were perfectly stable. There was no weakness, no decay. The journalist asks what happened to the removed sections. Vogel shakes his head. There is no record, and the people who ordered the removal are gone. Yet, he saved something. Before the ceilings were dismantled, he managed to sketch one of the patterns. He kept the drawing. Now, decades later, he unfolds it for the journalist. The pattern is intricate, spiraling forms connecting via straight channels, geometric nodes repeating at precise intervals, every line aligned with mathematical intention. The journalist photographs the sketch and consults acoustic engineers. Their assessment is immediate. The design functions as a passive acoustic waveguide, a mechanism that channels and amplifies sound without external power. The geometry enhances certain frequencies and suppresses others. A principle widely used in modern acoustic engineering, but only formally documented in the mid-20th century. This ceiling was built in 1878. Vogel's story is not isolated. Other conservators, when contacted, describe similar experiences. Rooms that responded strangely to sound, ornamental elements that behaved like calibrated instruments, walls that carried vibrations farther than stone should allow. In Vienna, one conservator recalls ceiling panels that hummed faintly when specific musical notes were played. In Budapest, another describes wall cavities that transmitted vibrations between distant rooms. Every one of them was told the same thing. Aesthetic details only. Do not test. The pattern repeats, architectural features designed with precision, installed in the 19th century, quietly dismantled or concealed during the 20th, and always accompanied by the same official reaction. Nothing to see, nothing unusual, just ornamentation. But Vogel's sketch endures. His measurements endure. The acoustic effects he documented can still be calculated. A fragment of evidence that refuses to vanish, even when someone clearly tried to make it disappear. Pattern recognition changes everything. A single anomaly can be dismissed as an error, a coincidence, a misplaced object. But when identical devices surface across different countries, separated by hundreds of kilometers and decades of forgotten history, the ground shifts beneath your feet. Vienna, 2014. During renovations in the Hofburg Palace, workers expose copper plates concealed inside a wall cavity. Each plate measures roughly 40 centimeters on a side. Spirals are engraved across the surface, and thin channels connect specific points like circuitry. The design is unmistakable. It is the same as the panel captured in the Prague photograph from 1889. Not merely similar, identical. The same spiral geometry, the same channel alignments, the same dimensions. Museum technicians review archival dates. Records list the installation year as 1892, 3 years after the Prague photo, and a full 12 years before electricity officially reached the Hofburg. The catalog entry reads blandly, "Decorative acoustic ornament. Artist unknown. Budapest, 2016. A restoration team in the Royal Palace Archives uncovers an unopened storage crate. Its inventory tag, dated 1923, contains a single word, confiscated. Inside, protected by layers of cloth, lies another copper panel. Same engravings, same structure, same impossible precision. A handwritten note rests beside it. Remove from East Gallery. Do not catalog with standard collection. Await further instruction." That instruction never came. The panel sat untouched for 93 years. Turin, 2018. At the Palazzo Reale, a structural assessment uses ground-penetrating radar. The scan detects metallic forms embedded inside the foundation walls. Excavation reveals 3 copper plates, corroded yet intact. Construction logs date the foundations to 1885. Those plates match Vienna and Budapest and Prague. Each discovery ignites the same pattern: initial excitement, careful analysis, full documentation, followed by quiet filing into storage and minimal public acknowledgement. But researchers begin connecting the dots. A doctoral student in architectural history compiles a database cataloging every known panel discovered in European palaces. The list grows quickly: Prague, 1889, Vienna, 1892, Budapest, 1887, Turin, 1885, Munich, 1891, Krakow, 1894. Every installation predates local electrification by years, sometimes by decades. The student maps the locations. The palaces form a sweeping arc across the continent, stretching from Paris through Vienna and Prague, then curving south toward Budapest and Turin. She examines the installation dates. They do not match typical technological spread. Innovation usually radiates outward from major centers, city by city. But these objects appear almost simultaneously across vast distances. Someone was installing identical equipment in multiple palaces within the same decade. Coordinated, deliberate, systematic. She applies for access to technical archives in each palace. Most reject her requests. Some claim records were lost during World War II. Others insist architectural details remain classified to protect historical integrity. Vienna grants limited access. In a faded ledger from the 1890s, she finds recurring line items: copper apparatus, resonant panels. The supplier is always the same, a firm called Technische Werkstätten Adler, based in Zurich. She digs deeper. The company existed from 1876 until 1921. It specialized in acoustic and electromagnetic apparatus. Its clients included royal households and government institutions across Europe. The company dissolved in 1921. All documents were supposedly destroyed in a warehouse fire that same year. Convenient timing. She contacts Swiss archives. They hold almost nothing. No tax records, no operational logs, only incorporation papers. A company that supplied advanced equipment to Europe's most important palaces for 45 years should have left a substantial paper trail. Instead, it left almost none. But the equipment survives. Copper panels, brass cylinders, resonant chambers, precision-cut metal plates, all sharing the same design language, all installed during the same narrow historical window, all predating the technologies they resemble by decades. The student publishes her findings in an academic journal. The reaction is muted. A few historians note the unusual pattern. Most dismiss it as coincidence, attributing the similarities to decorative trends in royal courts. But decorative trends do not require coordinated installation by a single specialized firm. And decorative pieces do not behave like engineered devices when subjected to technical testing. 3 months after the article appears, the student receives an email. No sender, no affiliation, no message body, just a single attachment, a photograph. It shows the interior of a warehouse. Copper panels stacked in rows, brass cylinders arranged on work tables, metal plates hanging from overhead rails, hundreds of identical objects, staged, sorted, prepared for shipment. The photograph is dated August 1921. 1 month before Technische Werkstätten, Adler supposedly burned to the ground. In the image, the warehouse is intact. No fire damage, no collapsed beams, no charred debris. There is nothing to indicate a disaster. The email address bounces when she tries to reply. No trace of the sender, no metadata to follow. But the photograph remains, irrefutable proof that mass production took place. that distribution was organized, that the installations were not isolated, anomalies, and that perhaps the fire that ended the company's history was not an accident at all. The pattern is undeniable now, not random discoveries, but a network, devices that should not exist, appearing across European palaces, supplied by a company that vanished and left behind only the evidence it could not completely erase. We began with a photograph, a copper panel in Prague that should not have existed. Then came a sealed chamber in Bavaria, filled with equipment designed for acoustic transmission decades before the public believed such technology was even conceivable. We listened to testimony, conservators describing ceilings that amplified sound with geometric precision, instructed to stay silent and accept the explanation of decoration. We traced identical objects appearing across Europe: Vienna, Budapest, Turin, Krakow, Munich, all installed within the same decade, all predating any known electrical infrastructure. And now, the question becomes unavoidable. Were European palaces outfitted with early acoustic electric systems long before electricity entered the public sphere? The evidence leads one way, while its implications pull sharply in another. Consider the accepted timeline. Thomas Edison demonstrates the light bulb in 1879. Public electrical grids begin appearing in major cities through the 1880s and 1890s. Royal residences adopt electricity between 1900 and 1910. Official history tells a clean, linear story: invention, adoption, gradual spread. But the copper panels appear earlier than Edison's demonstration. The Bavarian resonance chamber was sealed in 1873, 6 years before the light bulb existed. This leaves only two possibilities. Either the timeline is incomplete, or these devices served a purpose historians never recorded. Palace blueprints offer no help. Architectural plans from the 1870s and 1880s show standard room layouts: reception halls, drawing rooms, private chambers. No mention of acoustic laboratories, no experimental facilities, no indication that anything unusual was meant to be installed. Yet the rooms are real. The equipment is real. The measurements are real. Someone designed these systems. Someone installed them. Someone understood their purpose well enough to replicate identical components and distribute them across a continent. And someone made sure the public never learned of them. The pattern of suppression is as consistent as the pattern of installation: rooms sealed and removed from maps, records destroyed in conveniently timed fires, conservators warned to ignore functional behavior, materials confiscated and hidden away in unlabeled storage crates. If these devices were genuine technological breakthroughs, why were they erased instead of celebrated? Why no documentation of early pioneers? Why no mention of experiments decades ahead of their time? Unless the technology contradicted narratives someone needed to preserve. One more pattern emerges. Plot the palaces on a single map: Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Turin, Munich, Krakow. Add Paris, Dresden, Lisbon, and the other sites uncovered later. The locations form a sweeping arc across Europe, a precise curve that follows ancient pilgrimage routes, corridors used for centuries by travelers, merchants, clergy, the arteries of old power and influence. But the arc aligns with something else too. Geological surveys from the early 20th century document subtle magnetic anomalies along that same line. Regions where compasses drift, where electromagnetic readings behave irregularly. Coincidence? Possibly. But the alignment is difficult to ignore. The palaces were not random nodes. They occupied specific coordinates, places with natural properties that might have suited whatever purpose these installations served. We cannot say with certainty that a hidden power network stretched across 19th century Europe. The evidence is compelling, but incomplete. Too many pieces are missing by design. But we can say with confidence, Rooms were constructed with unexplained acoustic properties. Devices appeared decades before their documented invention. Identical equipment was installed across vast distances in a coordinated effort. Records were systematically erased. Surviving evidence was quietly hidden, mislabeled, or dismissed. History celebrates progress, but rarely acknowledges what it overwrote. Perhaps these palaces served as testing grounds, experiments that succeeded or failed, later absorbed or discarded by official narratives. Perhaps they were part of something far larger, a network operating beneath the surface of documented events, built in the margins between what we know and what we are told. The Prague photograph still exists. The sealed chamber in Bavaria still stands. Vogel's sketch still survives. The copper panels still sit in archives from Vienna to Budapest. And together, they point toward the same unsettling conclusion. Something existed that should not have existed. Something functioned before its time. Something was built, then hidden, then forgotten. But not entirely, because the evidence remains, silent, persistent, and waiting, resonating faintly behind palace walls where tourists walk every day, never realizing what lies just beyond the plaster. Paris, spring of 1873. The Exposition Universelle opens its doors, a sprawling showcase of the future. Crowds spill through grand halls to marvel at steam engines, industrial machinery, telegraphic equipment, the latest triumphs of European engineering. Photography from the exhibition survives. Catalogs list every approved installation. Official documents name each exhibitor and every authorized device. But some photographs capture objects the catalogs never explain. Inside the Palace of Industry Pavilion, among displays of French manufacturing, several bronze panels hang on the walls. The exhibition guidebook labels them simply as decorative metalwork, contemporary design, no manufacturer credited, no artist mentioned, nothing more than decorative. Except the panels are not decorative. In 2011, a researcher examining archival photographs notices details that original visitors overlooked. The bronze surfaces include carved channels, geometric grooves, contact points placed with meticulous regularity, and tubular structures embedded inside the metal. Technical sketches stored in the exposition archives confirm what the photographs suggest. Created by exhibitors themselves, these sketches show cross-sections of the panels, coils of copper wire, layered metal sheets separated by insulating material, and small chambers designed for containment. The sketch labels these chambers as resonateurs, resonators. Yet the public catalog omits every mention of this. The guidebook praises the panels only for their modern aesthetic expression. Why would complex technical apparatus be presented as art? A letter discovered in the French National Archives offers a clue. Written 3 weeks before the exposition opened, sent from the Ministère du Commerce to the organizing committee, it states, "Certain installations must be presented without technical explanation. Display as decorative contributions. Avoid inquiries regarding function." The letter is signed, but the signature is illegible. No corresponding entry appears in official ministry records, but the instruction was clearly obeyed. Panels with sophisticated internal components appeared as harmless ornamentation. Newspaper reviews from the time mention them briefly. One critic notes, "Fine examples of modern metalwork, though their purpose remains unclear." Another writes, "The bronze pieces emit a faint resonance when the hall quiets, as though remembering the fire that shaped them." A diary by a Parisian craftsman adds crucial detail. His name, Jules Beaumont. His workshop received a commission in 1872 to produce acoustic panels for an unnamed client. In his entry, he writes, "We tune them not for sound but for air. The chambers must align to specific frequencies. The client provides exact measurements. We are told to reveal nothing of their purpose. His workshop produced 47 panels over 8 months. Most were shipped to addresses across Europe. 6 were kept in Paris for the exposition. When the exhibition closed, those 6 panels vanished. Beaumont's diary records their removal. Men came at night, no reason given. We received additional payment for silence. His workshop never received another commission like it. Within 2 years, the business closed entirely. But the panels reappeared elsewhere, in Prague, Vienna, Munich, Budapest. Same bronze work, same internal structure, same enigmatic purpose. All of it introduced publicly at an exposition that pretended to introduce nothing new. The original exposition catalogue still sits in French libraries. Anyone can examine it. On the page describing the Palace of Industry Pavilion, the bronze panels appear in an illustration. Elegant geometric designs, impeccably crafted. The caption reads, "Bronzes decoratifs, usage ornamental. Decorative bronzes, ornamental use. No mention of resonators. No note about tuning. No acknowledgement of coils, channels, or the engineering hidden beneath the surface." The exposition gave nothing to the public record, and yet it distributed everything to those who recognized what they were seeing. 47 panels, quietly shipped across Europe, installed inside palaces during the following 2 decades, everyone labeled as decorative, everyone functioning as something far more advanced. Paris, 1873, was not the beginning, but it was the moment the technology stepped briefly into public view, disguised as art, before retreating back into the shadows of palace walls. The exhibition that introduced nothing, introduced everything. Look up in almost any European palace and you'll see domes, frescoes of myths and victories, gilded molding, painted heavens. Everything appears familiar, catalogued, expected, but beneath the plaster and gold, something else is hidden. Vienna, 2013. The Kunsthistorisches Museum begins dome restoration. Scaffolding climbs upward, workers remove sections of decorative plaster, exposing the structure beneath. What they find is not wiring, not ventilation, not reinforcement. They find copper. Not random sheets, but lattices. Geometric grids embedded directly into the dome's support structure. The pattern forms a honeycomb, each cell precisely 12 centimeters wide. The lattice stretches across the entire interior of the dome, following its curvature perfectly. The dome was completed in 1891. An engineering consultant examines the exposed copper and delivers his assessment without hesitation. This is an acoustic focusing array. The geometry mirrors designs used in 20th century physics laboratories, parabolic sound mirrors, resonance chambers, devices engineered to concentrate acoustic energy at exact focal points. But those designs emerged from research in the 1930s and 1940s, decades after this dome was built. The consultant runs calculations. Given the dome's dimensions, curvature, and lattice geometry, the system would direct sound to 3 precise focal points inside the building, verified on original architectural plans. One point lies in the center of the main gallery, another in a former administrative office, the third in what used to be a private meeting room, now a storage area. He recommends further testing. Palace authorities decline. The copper lattice is quietly covered with fresh plaster, and restoration moves on. Technical reports mention the discovery, but no one outside the project team ever reads them. The consultant shares his findings privately. Colleagues begin examining other palace domes: Prague, Budapest, Munich, Dresden, Lisbon. Every major palace dome built between 1870 and 1900 contains similar features: copper grids beneath decorative surfaces, mathematically precise geometric patterns that offer no structural benefit, yet align perfectly with acoustic focusing principles. Official architectural descriptions dismiss these elements as stabilization frameworks or decorative metal foundations. No mention of acoustics, no acknowledgement of the precision. An architectural historian uncovers invoices from the Prague Castle Dome renovation of 1883. The line items include copper lattice, custom geometry, and resonant chamber installation. The invoices are signed by the same Zurich firm, Technische Werkstätten Adler, the same company linked to the bronze panels, the same company connected to sealed rooms, hidden chambers, and unexplained apparatuses across Europe. A patents researcher discovers something even more revealing. In 1897, a German engineer filed a patent for an acoustic focusing apparatus using geometric metal arrays. The diagrams show honeycomb copper lattices nearly identical to those hidden inside palace domes. The patent was rejected. The official reason: prior art exists. Application denied. Prior art, meaning the technology already existed. Yet no earlier patents appear in any registry. No research papers discuss these systems. No academic references pre-1900 describe anything remotely similar. So where did the prior art reside? In the domes built 15 years earlier? In systems never publicly documented? In installations hidden beneath plaster, known only to builders and select officials? The rejected patent suggests the truth. The technology was acknowledged by insiders, but not meant for the public. Documented privately, restricted officially, prohibited from being patented. Decades later, engineers would invent acoustic focusing arrays through military and scientific research. They believed they were pioneers, that they were creating something entirely new. But the palaces had contained the same principles all along, embedded silently into their architecture, focusing sound waves through copper grids that were never supposed to be discovered. Tourists walk beneath these domes every day. They admire the paintings. They photograph the gilded trim. They listen to echoes without realizing those echoes are being shaped, directed, and amplified by a system designed more than a century ago. The domes were not decoration. They were infrastructure. Infrastructure for a system we are only beginning to understand. Vienna, the Hofburg Palace, seat of Habsburg power for more than 6 centuries. Tour guides lead visitors through the usual route: the state apartments, Sisi's rooms, imperial reception halls. Everything polished, curated, familiar. But some rooms never appear on those tours. Documents preserved in Vienna's Technical Institute contain references dating back to 1893. They are labeled Resonanzkammern, resonance rooms. The term appears in budget reports, maintenance logs, construction invoices. No descriptions, no explanations. Only a mysterious category buried among routine expenditures. One document breaks the pattern. A letter from 1911, written by a court engineer, addressed to the palace administrator. It states, "Per directive, we must remove the rods from the east wing before public inspection. Their function cannot be disclosed without raising inquiries we are not authorized to address." No detail about what the rods are. No reason. No context. But removal records from that same year list the items extracted from the east wing. Brass resonator rods, quantity 42 copper focusing plates, quantity 18 junction apparatus, custom manufacture. All materials were transported to an imperial technical facility. From there, the trail ends. No record explains what became of them. Shortly afterward, the East Wing rooms were repainted, refurnished, and included in public tours, as if nothing unusual had ever existed. They were presented as ordinary administrative spaces. But one maintenance worker kept a journal. His name was Franz Kohler. He worked at the Hofburg from 1902 until 1914. His entry from March 1911 describes the removal. The men arrived at dawn. They had a military escort. They dismantled the rods with great care, as if handling explosives. The foreman warned us, "Do not touch the junction points." When I asked why, he said the metal still held charge. But there was no electricity in that wing. Kohler notes something else. Before the rods were removed, the rooms emitted a faint humming, a tone barely perceptible, present even at night when the palace was silent. After removal, the humming vanished. He writes, "The air felt different, lighter, as if pressure had been released." Another piece of evidence survives, a technical testing report from 1897. It describes acoustic measurements performed in the East Wing resonance rooms. The report reads, "Vibration detected at 112 Hz, sustained indefinitely without external input. Source unknown. Phenomenon present in multiple chambers simultaneously. 112 Hz, a low frequency, generally beyond human perception, yet measurable, consistent, and reportedly endless. Modern physics reject such behavior. Vibrations decay. Resonance fades. Sustained oscillation requires continuous power." But the report is explicit, indefinitely, without external input. Researchers who analyze Kohler's journal and the technical report notice a crucial detail. The 42 brass rods, when reconstructed according to surviving installation diagrams, form a geometric array. The array precisely matches the patterns used in modern resonant cavity systems, devices that capture and amplify specific frequencies through calculated geometry. These concepts were first described theoretically in the 1930s. Practical versions were built in the 1950s, but the Hofburg installed them in the 1890s. A historian investigates Austrian military archives. She requests files on the Imperial Technical Facility where the rods were taken. The facility was demolished in 1923. Official reports claim all equipment was destroyed as part of standard decommissioning. But demolition records reveal irregularities. The entire site was cleared in 6 days, extraordinarily fast for a structure of that size. The contract was issued without competitive bidding. Permits were approved in a single afternoon. Someone wanted that facility gone, quickly and quietly. The resonance rooms existed. The rods existed. The humming existed. The sustained vibration was measured and documented. And then, within 12 years, the system was dismantled, transported, erased. Why? What was the Habsburg court trying to hide? The rooms themselves still hold one final clue. During modern preservation work, acoustic engineers measure the structure of the East Wing and discover something unexpected. The walls contain cavities, empty channels running between stone layers. They trace deliberate paths, linking rooms, corridors, and stairwells across multiple floors. These are not structural defects. They are waveguides, acoustic channels engineered to carry vibrations with minimal loss, amplifying specific frequencies at junction points. The entire East Wing was designed as a resonant architecture, not modified later, but built this way from the beginning. The brass rods were not the system itself. They were the tuning elements, the components that calibrated and focused what the building already did. The palace was the instrument, and someone knew exactly how to play it. Between 1890 and 1910, electricity swept across Europe. Cities built power grids, factories installed electric motors, private homes received lighting. The transition was documented, celebrated, and described as a revolution. Patent offices preserved the story. Electrical generators, wiring systems, lighting devices, a clear linear evolution of modern technology. But one category is conspicuously absent. Nowhere in public patents do we find the technologies uncovered in the palaces. No filings describe copper lattices built into domes. No documentation explains brass resonator rods. No references to sustained vibration functioning without power. And yet, Simplified versions appear. In 1898, a German firm patents an acoustic amplification panel. The design includes geometric copper channels, reminiscent of palace panels, but stripped down. No resonant chambers, no tuning structures, a hollowed-out imitation. In 1903, a French engineer patents architectural acoustic enhancement using metal arrays. Again, there is a resemblance, but only superficial. The geometry is imprecise. The focusing ability is diminished. In 1907, an Austrian company files for a resonant metal plate apparatus. Engraved spirals, copper plates. But the patent calls their acoustic effect incidental, a side effect, not a function. Incidental, a word used to obscure intent. Across dozens of patents, the pattern repeats. The public versions echo palace systems, but never match their sophistication. A technology chain in which the prototypes came first, decades before their invention reached the public. A patents researcher maps the timeline and sees it clearly. Palace systems in the 1870s and 80s. Simplified public versions in the 1890s and early 1900s. It is technology flowing backward, not invention, adoption, but prototype, suppression, controlled release. She examines backgrounds of patent applicants. Many are employees of electrical giants like Siemens and AEG, but several stand out. Former court engineers, palace architects, men who held technical positions in royal households. They are not inventing new devices. They are releasing domesticated versions of what already existed. One patent contains an especially revealing line. Filed in 1905 by a former Hofburg engineer, it describes an acoustic resonance apparatus derived from established architectural practices. Derived, not created, derived. The patent office approves the filing without comment, but the phrase reveals everything. The technology was already established long before anyone sought a patent. Meanwhile, the public rollout of electricity accelerates. Companies market innovations. Newspapers celebrate progress. Europe enters a bright, modern age powered by light bulbs and motors. But those same companies never mention resonant chambers. No demonstrations include sustained vibration. No blueprints show copper focusing arrays. Those details stay absent, quarantined from the public narrative. The comparison is stark. Palace systems included multi-chamber resonators, precise geometric arrays, sustained oscillation, multi-point acoustic focusing, architecture. Integrated operation public patents include basic acoustic panels, approximate geometric patterns, conventional amplification, single-point reflection, detachable devices. Everything truly sophisticated is removed. Everything unusual is simplified. Everything inexplicable is hidden. What appears in public is deliberately incomplete. An electrical engineer reviewing both palace evidence and public patents summarizes it perfectly. Someone took an advanced system, stripped away components they didn't want people to understand, and released the remainder. Enough to be useful, but not enough to reveal the original design. Thus, the adoption of acoustic electric systems becomes part of a sanitized narrative. Engineers innovate, companies compete, factories modernize, societies progress. But beneath that tidy industrial fairy tale lies another story. One where palaces served as covert prototypes, testing technologies that remained concealed for decades. The public believed electricity represented a new beginning. What they did not know was that pieces of its underlying principles had been active long before, buried in walls, domes, sealed chambers, and resonance rooms. Europe entered the electrical age, thinking it was witnessing innovation. In reality, it was seeing a controlled release, the safe portions, the manageable fragments, the parts that would not expose what came before. The true age of electricity did not begin when Thomas Edison lit a bulb. It began decades earlier, in palaces, behind locked doors, inside rooms we are only now rediscovering. World War I ended in November 1918. Europe lay devastated, empires collapsed, borders redrawn, monarchies dissolved. And in the chaos, something else happened quietly. Palace modernization programs began across Europe. Official explanations emphasized progress, updating outdated royal residences for contemporary use, installing modern amenities, removing obsolete elements, reasonable, expected, necessary. But the removal logs tell a different story. Vienna, 1919. Hofburg Palace Renovation Records List. Remove non-functional acoustic apparatus from East Wing chambers. Dispose per military protocol. Non-functional. Yet Kohler's journal described sustained vibration. Testing reports measured constant resonance. The equipment clearly functioned. Prague, 1920. Castle Maintenance Logs note, dismantle copper installations, rooms 14 through 22. Materials to be scrapped. No inventory required. No inventory. Nothing preserved. Everything destroyed. Budapest, 1921. Royal. Palace restoration documents state, clear resonance chambers. Architectural elements deemed obsolete. Remove all metalwork for salvage. Salvage suggests reuse. But salvage records show no copper or brass entering municipal metal supplies. The materials vanished. The pattern repeats. Turin, Munich, Dresden, Krakow. Every palace that contained acoustic resonance systems undergoes similar removals between 1918 and 1923. The work happens quickly. Crews arrive. Equipment disappears. Rooms are replastered. Within weeks, no evidence remains. One removal contract survives intact, dated January 1920, issued for work at Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna. The contract specifies, remove all acoustic devices before structural renovation, materials classified, transport under military supervision, do not photograph, do not photograph. Why classify acoustic panels as military materials? Why prohibit documentation? Why require armed transport for decorative metalwork? A palace administrator in Munich kept private notes. His entries from October 1920 describe the removal process. The crews work with unusual precision. They know exactly which panels to take, which rooms to clear. No consultation with palace records. No examination of architectural plans. They arrive with lists, predetermined. Someone mapped these installations long before the war ended. Someone knew what was there. Someone knew where it was located. Someone planned the removal while fighting still raged. The timing is crucial. Europe was rebuilding. Resources were scarce. Labor was expensive. Yet significant funds were allocated specifically to remove acoustic equipment from palaces. Priority work. Funded despite economic collapse. Several items listed as scrapped reappear decades later in private collections. A copper panel surfaces at a Zurich estate sale in 1968. Provenance listed as Austrian imperial property, circa 1890. The panel matches removal logs from Vienna's Hofburg, listed as destroyed in 1919. Yet it survived, preserved by someone with access to removed materials. When tested in the 1970s, the panel shows electromagnetic activity, faint but measurable. Despite containing no wires, no power source, no obvious mechanism for generating fields. Other pieces appear sporadically. A brass cylinder in a Berlin antique shop, resonant chambers in a Paris private collection, always with vague provenance, always recovered from estate liquidations or industrial salvage, never with official documentation, never with clear chains of custody. The removal was systematic, but not perfectly complete. Some pieces escaped destruction, hidden by workers, acquired by collectors, preserved through channels outside official demolition. These survivors prove what was destroyed. They function, they resonate, they demonstrate capabilities that shouldn't exist in 19th century metalwork, and they reveal the scale of what was erased. If dozens of palaces each contained multiple installations, and most were destroyed, thousands of components vanished. Tons of sophisticated equipment deliberately eliminated, not obsolete, not broken, not replaced by superior technology, simply removed, classified, destroyed. Because after the war, new governments took power. Republics replaced monarchies. Democratic institutions occupied former royal residences, and the new authorities couldn't allow questions about what the old regimes had built, about technologies that predated public innovation, about systems operating in secret while citizens believed progress was just arriving. The erasure wasn't about removing outdated equipment. It was about rewriting history, creating a clean narrative where electricity emerged naturally through scientific progress and public adoption, where palaces were merely beautiful buildings, not experimental facilities, not testing grounds for technologies decades ahead of their time. The Great Erasure succeeded largely. Most evidence was destroyed, most records disappeared, most installations were reduced to rubble and melted metal. But not all, because some things refuse to be forgotten completely. Some evidence resists destruction, some traces remain, waiting in museum storage, hidden in private collections, embedded in walls we haven't yet examined. The erasure began, but it never quite finished. Yet one demolition record suggests they came dangerously close to erasing everything that mattered. Prague, spring 1920. A demolition order arrives at Prague Castle. The document is brief, 3 paragraphs, signed by the newly formed Czechoslovak Ministry of Public Works. Authorization granted for demolition of East Wing, sections G through M work, to commence immediately. Complete demolition within 60 days. All materials to be cleared from site. Standard administrative language. Routine demolition. Nothing unusual, except for one line buried in the second paragraph. Remove all acoustic devices before demolition. Do not photograph. The same instruction that appeared in other palace removals. Remove acoustic devices. Do not photograph. But this demolition was different. Not selective removal. Complete destruction. An entire wing reduced to rubble. The East Wing of Prague Castle. 7 connected sections, built over 3 centuries, containing administrative offices, storage chambers, and something else. Something significant enough to warrant total demolition. Construction records for the East Wing date to 1874. The wing was built specifically to house technical installations according to budget documents. No further details provided. A single inventory log from 1889 lists the wing's contents. Resonance apparatus, multiple configurations, copper transmission arrays, focusing chambers, experimental design, acoustic junction stations, plural, multiple connection points within a single wing. The scale suggests something beyond individual rooms, beyond isolated installations. The entire wing functioned as an integrated system, and in 1920 it was ordered destroyed. Demolition proceeded on schedule. Workers cleared the wing room by room. Salvageable materials were removed first. Then structural demolition began. But documentation of the demolition is missing. No photographs exist, no progress reports, no inspection records, no salvage inventories. For a major demolition project at a national monument, the absence is inexplicable. One document survives, a single page, a handwritten note dated May 1920, found decades later in municipal archives. The note reads, "Demolition crew reports unusual findings in subsection K. Metal framework extends below foundation level. Architecture suggests connection to adjacent structures. Recommend survey before proceeding. The note ends there. No response. No follow-up. No indication whether the recommendation was accepted. But demolition continued. The entire wing came down. Within 60 days, as ordered. The site was cleared. Foundations were filled. New construction began within a year. Modern administrative buildings now occupy that section of the castle grounds. Nothing remains of the East Wing. Nothing marks its location. Tourist maps don't show it. Historical guides rarely mention it. 7 sections of a functioning palace wing. Gone. Deliberately erased. But here's what makes this demolition different. What makes it the collapse moment. Other palaces had rooms removed, equipment dismantled, installations destroyed. But the buildings remained. The architecture survived. Evidence could potentially be reconstructed from surviving structures. Prague Castle's East Wing left nothing. No walls to examine. No foundations to scan. No cavities to analyze. Complete removal. If other palace installations were prototypes, experiments, individual components of a larger system, then what was the Prague East Wing? The demolition suggests an answer. It was central, critical, important enough that partial removal wasn't sufficient. The entire structure had to disappear, and with it, any understanding of how the system worked. We have copper panels, brass cylinders, resonant chambers, acoustic focusing arrays, individual pieces recovered from various palaces. But we don't have the architecture that connected them. The junction stations that linked installations across rooms, the subsurface framework that extended below foundations. The Prague East Wing contained that infrastructure, the central node, the hub that made sense of everything else, and it was demolished so thoroughly that we can't even confirm exactly where it stood. This is the contradiction that collapses everything. If these installations were genuine technological achievements, why destroy the most important example? Why not preserve it, study it, build upon it? If they were merely decorative, why demolish an entire palace wing to eliminate them? Why not simply remove the equipment and repurpose the space? The answer satisfies neither explanation. They were important enough to require total destruction, yet their importance couldn't be acknowledged publicly. Advanced enough to threaten some narrative, yet not valuable enough to preserve. Connected enough to require elimination of the entire system, yet isolated enough that removing one node could succeed. The logic spirals, contradicts itself, refuses to resolve. We're left standing in front of modern administrative buildings in Prague, where tourists walk, where government offices function, where nothing suggests that beneath these ordinary structures, something extraordinary once existed. Something so significant it had to be not just removed, but obliterated. Erased so completely that we can barely prove it was there. The pattern made sense until this moment. Palace installations, coordinated systems, controlled public release, systematic removal. But the Prague demolition breaks the pattern. It suggests desperation, an urgency that goes beyond careful concealment. Someone needed that wing destroyed, completely, immediately, permanently, which means it contained something the other palaces didn't, something that couldn't be allowed to survive, even in fragments, even in memory. The great erasure succeeded here, too well, because now we can't know what we lost. Official records can be altered, documents can be destroyed, buildings can be demolished, but personal memory is harder to erase. Throughout our investigation, we've encountered fragments of human testimony. Franz Kohler's journal describing the removal of brass rods, Heinrich Vogel's account of ceilings that amplified sound, Jules Beaumont's notes about tuning panels, not for sound, but for air. These weren't official reports. They were private observations, personal experiences recorded without expectation of historical significance. And there are more. An architect's diary from Budapest, dated 1897. He describes working on palace renovations. The rooms vibrate when empty, a tone so low it cannot be heard, only felt. The engineers call it resonance. But resonance requires a source. These rooms resonate without cause. A maintenance supervisor's log from Turin, 1909. Replaced copper fixtures in East Gallery. The metal was warm to touch, though no heating system operates in that section. Foreman instructed us to work quickly and ask no questions. A palace guard's memoir from Vienna, written in the 1930s, but recalling events from 1912. At night, when the palace emptied, you could feel it, not hear it, feel it. A pressure in the air, like standing near a bell that had just stopped ringing. The sensation strongest near certain rooms. Rooms we were told not to enter. These are not sensational claims, not dramatic revelations, just quiet observations from people who noticed something inexplicable and wrote it down. They describe physical sensations, pressure, warmth, vibration felt rather than heard, consistent experiences across different locations and different decades. One diary entry stands out, written by a Czech engineer named Pavel Novak. He worked at Prague Castle from 1892 to 1918. His final entry, dated March 1918, reads, "They will dismantle it soon. I can feel the decision forming even as the war still rages. What we built here cannot exist in the world that comes after. It asks too many questions. It suggests too many possibilities. Better to destroy it than explain it." I have made my own notes, technical drawings, measurements. I will hide them where perhaps someone in a better time might find them and understand what we achieved. Novak's hidden notes have never been found, but his journal confirms what the demolition records suggest. The removal was planned, deliberate, driven by concerns about the questions the technology would raise. Another voice emerges from an unexpected source, a letter discovered in a Lisbon archive, written in 1923 by a Portuguese engineer to his brother in Brazil. The letter describes his work removing acoustic installations from colonial buildings. "We are erasing something remarkable. I do not fully understand its purpose, but I recognize its sophistication. Future generations will not believe such systems existed. Perhaps that is the intention. Perhaps that is the intention." Those 5 words capture the entire purpose of the erasure. Not to remove obsolete equipment, but to make the technology unbelievable, to ensure that even if evidence survived, it would seem impossible. The personal accounts share common elements: awe at the technology, confusion about its purpose, recognition of deliberate suppression, and often a quiet sadness about what was being lost. These were engineers and architects, people who understood technical systems. They recognized that something sophisticated was being destroyed, something that represented genuine achievement. But they also understood they were powerless to stop it. They could only observe, record, remember, and sometimes hide their observations in journals and letters that might survive when official records did not. These voices matter because they humanize the mystery. Behind the copper panels and brass cylinders were people. People who built these systems. People who maintained them. People who witnessed their removal. They experienced awe, confusion, curiosity, fear. They felt vibrations in empty rooms. They noticed metal that stayed warm without heat. They sensed pressure that had no source. They knew something existed that shouldn't exist. And when it was destroyed, they felt the loss. Not everyone stayed silent. Pavel Novak hid technical drawings. Jules Beaumont kept detailed notes. Heinrich Vogel preserved his sketches against instructions not to document. Small acts of resistance, private defiance against official erasure. And those acts succeeded. Because we have their words now. We can read Kohler's descriptions. We can examine Vogel's drawings. We can trace Beaumont's specifications. The technology was destroyed, but the memory of it survived, preserved in personal journals, hidden in private letters, recorded by people who understood that what they witnessed mattered. The official narrative tried to erase not just the equipment, but the very idea that such equipment existed. The personal accounts prove that erasure failed, because people remembered. People wrote it down. People preserved their testimony even when doing so was discouraged or dangerous. And now their voices speak across decades, quiet, persistent, refusing to let the mystery die completely, telling us, yes, this happened. Yes, we saw it. Yes, it was real.